Hi. In this week's edition of Screen Talk, we speak with film producer and film financier Anne Sheehan and discuss how film financing works. Anne has supported many major feature film productions, including Chef, Tale of Tales, Miss You Already, Eye in the Sky, The Killing of the Sacred Deer, and Official Secrets, which starred Keira Knightley and filmed at locations in Bradford and across Yorkshire. Would you give a big warm Bradford welcome for Anne Sheehan? Thank you. Welcome, Anne. Welcome to Bradford. So you have been before. I was mistaken thinking you've not been before.
Yeah, I did. I was in Leeds. I lived in Leeds for 8 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we've heard of it. So I wanted to start really by where did you start? What was your first job? And was it in film?
My first ever job.
Yeah.
Well, not when I was at school. My Saturday job at school. I actually did a degree in Leeds it was a place that was then called City of Leeds in Carnegie College. I think it's part of Bradford Metropolitan University now or something. Anyway, I did a teaching degree in maths and drama, which is quite appropriate, really.
Yeah.
And I decided that I didn't want to be a teacher. I mean, I actually liked teaching, but I didn't want to go back to school. I'd only just left and it felt, and so I went into accountancy and I trained as a chartered accountant, but I didn't want to do that either. I wanted to get into a proper business and it was quite random really. I just thought, I want to work in an industry that builds something. I didn't want to, where it's the same thing all the time, like, groceries or whatever. So I thought about construction or, anyway, by happenstance, I went to an agency. I nearly ended up going to work for an advertising company as an internal, what they called operational auditor. And while I was going through that sort of process, the agency said, oh, there's this other job that's come up. And because it was this internal auditor thing, it meant a lot of travel. So they said, oh, the advertising job, I was going to be traveling 30% of the time. And they said, there's this job that's come up, but you'll be traveling 90% of the time. And it's with what was then Warner Communications Inc., which was the holding company for Warner Brothers Films, WEA Records, Warner Home Video, Warner Music Publishing. So I got this job, which was, for 3 years, it was the best job in the world until it drove me crazy and was the worst job in the world. But I got paid to stay in 4-star hotels and jump on planes. And
all over the world?
Mostly in Europe, because my office was based in London and we covered Europe. In theory, Africa, but I never got to go to Africa. And a couple of times I got borrowed. There was an office in New York, so they borrowed me once, which was my first time going to the States. And I also went to LA. So that was my introduction. And it was a brilliant introduction because it's called show business, rightly, I think, because it's both things really matter. It's the show, but it's also a business. And there's commercial sort of, imperatives to it. So I found that really helpful. But after 3 years of not continually travelling.
And what sort of stuff were you doing at that point? Were you auditing?
We were like internal management consultants.
Right.
So you'd go in and you'd have to do some really boring stuff like checking the bank reconciliation was being done.
Yeah.
But you also looked at the way they operated. So it was, we had a real free rein. And the reporting line was right up to the audit committee, which was reported to the main board.
Yeah.
So people were very, they were.
Respectful of you.
They were there because even though
position.
Yeah, because your reporting line went way up to the top. So it was taken seriously.
And at what point did you get into producing? And I'm going to define producing a bit more. But at what point did you begin to sort of raise finance for films?
Quite a long way after, because I got fed up, like I said, with the travelling, and I wanted to, you know, put down some roots again and settle down, because the whole time I was doing this job, I didn't actually have a home. I'd been living in Bristol, renting. I gave that up, and my parents lived in London, so I just left my stuff in their place and lived out of a suitcase for 3 years. So I wanted to sort of have a more normal life again. And I wrote to 10 different film production companies in the UK. It wouldn't, you know, and in those days, at the back of screen, they listed all the films that were currently in production. And it wasn't that many. The independent world was very, very small then. So I wrote to 10 companies, said, "Give us a job." And they all answered, which again wouldn't happen now. And I got 2 job offers. And I went to work for a company called Palace Pictures. And I, for a long time, you know, I worked for different companies. I was finance, and they don't, you know, if you're in a finance, they keep you in the back office, and they don't let you out. And all the deals are done by the lawyers, and I was really jealous, and I really wanted to get close to. So eventually, I managed to migrate into being business affairs. So you're doing the deals, not just counting the pennies afterwards. Yeah. And the first job I did that was I worked for a company called Renaissance Films, which had been started by Kenneth Branagh, and I was there long after he'd been involved. He'd left, but it was the company that made Man Has King George and Wings of a Dove. Period I was there, we didn't make such good films, unfortunately, but that was when I really got into the producing side, and from then on, I stayed on being on the business affairs, exec producing, you know, what stage of things. That was from 1999 onwards.
So I wanted a definition of an exec producer, just to drill down a little more, because, you know, I work with Steve Abbott quite a bit, and, you know, he says, "Oh, films change so much that everybody's a producer these days." That's not a very good impersonation, but I do a better one over the phone, don't I, Rachel? I just wonder, can anyone be an exec producer? If I give you £1,000 now towards this project that's 500,000, does that make me exec producer?
No. But
and what's the definition then?
It should be the people who are financing the film.
Right.
And most exec producers, it's different in film from television. Right. In film, the producer, especially the person who gets the produced by credit, and who gets I don't know if you know, some of you will know this, but on films, it'll say producer, and then it'll say P.G.A, which is Producers Guild of America. And that is the accreditation, because the PGA, and rightly so, are very strict about who gets to be the producer. And, you know, there was a period where, I know I'm going a bit off point, I'll get back to producers. There was some film, I can't remember what it was, but there were about 15 people, when it was it's the producers who get the best film Oscar. And now the Academy have limited it to 3 people, though sometimes one person can be a partnership.
Yes.
Because it was ridiculous, like they announced the best film and about 20 people got up on stage, you know, and they're all going, "Hello, Mum," kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, in America especially, people put money into a film and claim a producer credit, and it's not right.
Okay.
In television, the producer credit is more like the line producer, and the executive producer credit is the one for the creatives who've really, you know, created the show, the showrunners, the writers get them as well. So it's different. But in film, executive producers should be people who have facilitated it, yes, brought the money to the table, but they're not the people who, you know, the producer. And the producers are the unsung heroes and heroines of the whole thing. They take it from cradle to grave.
Keeping it all together, but they also hire and fire, don't they? So, because you're the director I mean, the simplistic way of breaking it down is the director's responsible for everything we see in front of the camera, and the producer for everything else. Is that so?
Sort of. I mean, the producer hires the director, and they hopefully hire a director who's got the right vision for that project. But it's the director, it's the producer who decides, I want to adapt that book or that film or that play, or I want to take an original idea, and they are the project managers are extraordinaire and great. You know, they have to be really good multitaskers.
Multitaskers, yeah. And we've heard that through our screen talks with some of the other producers that we've spoken to. And I wonder then, in terms of that multitasking, and there's probably not a right answer to this, but in terms of the talent to getting the money coming in, let's take Official Secrets, for instance. Official Secrets, if you don't know, is out at the moment. It's got Keira Knightley in. It's the true story of...
It was the second one on the... It was the second clip.
The second clip on there, filmed in parts of it in City Hall, parts of it in Shipley at the tax office. And so Keira Knightley's there. So straight away you would expect that people would want to invest in a film that's got Keira Knightley. It's got Gavin Hood directing, who was really successful with Eye in the Sky with Helen Mirren. So in what order? So you've got a good script, you've got a story that someone wants to tell, you've then got the talent associated with it. Is the distribution, does the money come flooding in because suddenly you can say Keira Knightley's going to be in this? And then how much of the distribution do you need to... I'm just interested in the mechanics of how you get someone to hand over £5 million, for instance.
I mean, there is this inherent chicken and egg problem that nobody will give you the money till you've got the talent attached, but the talent won't let themselves be attached if they don't think the money is there.
Right.
But it varies. Obviously, more established producers, they've got a track record, they've got the agents, you know, who are the gatekeepers to the talent, will take it seriously if it's a producer who's already got a track record. I mean, that one, it's kind of moving. You know, independent filmmaking in the UK was very much a jigsaw of different sources of finance. So you'd have the UK tax credit, you'd have a UK distributor putting up pre-buying the UK distribution rights, equity from the BFI maybe, a gap deal from somebody who puts up loan finance that's last in, first out. But,
our friends at Screen Yorkshire.
Yeah, Screen Yorkshire. So with Official Secrets, it was a much more simple finance plan than that. It was one-stop shopping, effectively, because there were three parties that financed that film. One of them was the person I was representing who got a producer credit on it, a Chinese investor called Melissa, and I got an exec producer credit because I was managing her investment. There was Screen Yorkshire. Basically, it worked out, Melissa put up 10% of the money, but she also funded the takeover cost, because it was a film that started and was going to be made with completely different group of people, different producers, different everything. This doesn't normally happen. Normally, if a film falls apart, it stays fallen apart. With Official Secrets, it was, it was a great story. It was going to be directed by Justin Chadwick. Natalie Dormer was going to play the lead, but the producers hadn't got the money sorted out. And it started and then fell apart. They were into pre-production. They did about 2 or 3 weeks of pre-production, I think, hired loads of crew, and then had to lay everybody off. So people hadn't been paid. You know, they'd worked and were owed money. Then Jed Doherty, who had produced Eye in the Sky with Gavin Hood, he heard about it and he was interested in it. He talked to Gavin about it. Gavin read the original script. He was interested, wants to come on board. And Melissa was an investor who had met Jed through her you know, I mean, very wealthy Chinese family, but she was interested in getting into the film business, and her parents had met, like you do. Her parents had met Jed. I'll start this sentence again. Jed Doherty runs a production company called Rain Dog, and his partner is Colin Firth. And Colin Firth had met Melissa's parents at an Oscar bash, and he introduced them to Jed. Then Melissa, anyway, I was introduced to Melissa by Jed, and I said, well, she needs looking after.
Yeah. So this was her first venture into the film
Yeah,
world.
and I said, you can't do it. You're conflicted, but I can. So that's how I got that gig. Right. And I had already worked on Eye in the Sky with Jed, so I knew him, and you know, I'd been doing consulting for him because we had a mutual friend in common. So that's how I mean, it is all, you know, it is quite a small industry, and these things do.
I think it is a lot of it is who you know and how you can, but how you can take that chance of doing that bit of work in that office and working your way to get to know someone who trusts you, that they can. So with Jed, for instance, him trusting you to look after Melissa, it's a key part of that all coming together, and that's because you'd worked previously on. Was Jed involved in Eye in the Sky?
Yeah, he produced Eye in the Sky. Yeah. That was his first film. I mean, Jed is an interesting case because he was in the music industry for years. His entire career started off he's from Manchester, and he started off managing bands and ended up being head of Sony Music UK. And he met Colin Firth because, anyway, they met Colin Firth. And Colin said he was interested in starting his own film production company, so they decided to partner up.
Brilliant.
And I have a friend who went out with Jed many moons ago, and he'd asked her if she knew anybody who was on the finance side, blah, blah, blah. So that's how I got involved.
We're only 2 or 3 handshakes away from being, you know, where you want to be. That's true, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's true.
It is, you know, I mean, it's very hard. Well, I'm sure you want to talk about that, how people get into the business. But with Eye in the Sky, Jed met. So Eye in the Sky, the script was written as an original screenplay by the writer Guy Hibbert, and he had been trying to find somebody who wanted to produce it. He met Jed at a party, I think, gave him the script. Jed liked it. I don't know how Jed knew Gavin, but you know, he showed, and that's how that film happened. And because Gavin and Jed had done Eye in the Sky, Jed took him Official Secrets, and E1 had fully financed Eye in the Sky. E1 out of the UK. In this case, E1 had closed down that department in the UK, and Jed took it to a guy called Mark Gordon, who's a veteran US producer, who had a company called Mark Gordon Company, which was 49% owned by E1. And so Mark Gordon wanted to do it, and E1 they're financiers and they're distributors.
Yes.
And they can write a check for the whole thing.
Gosh.
But of course, then in terms of casting, it's about finding the right person who is acceptable to them. So they'll say, yes, we want to do it, but obviously it's subject to the talent. So lots of different people were approached. You know, they approached Carey Mulligan. I can't remember everybody now, but you know, people are having babies. You know, because which was the case in Carey Mulligan's case. You know, they've been working a lot and they want the summer off. And anyway, then it's about finding, you know, the lead is the Keira Knightley character, and then once she was cast, they got, you know, then it's you that's the main, and then you have to find, because then you have to cast people who will work. Anyway, it's an art as much as a science. But
and it was know your people is another tip for you from me. So Gavin Hood was acted in Eye in the Sky as well as directing it. Is
Oh yeah, he started off as an actor, Gavin.
So Gavin Hood's this big sort of rugby playing type. I thought was Australian, and I'm glad I didn't say to him what part of Australia you're from, because he's from bloody South Africa. So again, it does well to do a quick IMDb and a quick Wikipedia. Don't believe everything it says on Wikipedia, but I very nearly went, so where are you from in Australia? I was going to talk about Sydney being a city of film. He's not, he's South African.
Yeah.
And the accents don't sound the same, but just the way he was articulating and gesticulating in...
Yeah, he's got a cameo. He's got a little role in Eye in the Sky, and he's in Official Secrets as well, isn't he? I think he is. I think he's doing a bit of a Hitchcock, you know.
Yeah. He's an interesting character, and he basically edited the film on all the recce's we did around City Hall and stuff. We were there for hours. I mean, it was interesting to a point.
But he directed. I can never pronounce it correctly. Tsotsi.
Oh yeah.
That South African film. He was Oscar nominated for that. In fact, I think it won. I think it won Best Foreign Language Oscar. And then he went to LA. But you know, his Eye in the Sky was all filmed in South Africa.
Oh really?
It's set.
Even the Helen Mirren shots in the basement on the phone.
Everything.
Gosh.
It was because it was cheaper.
Right.
And also, it's his home country. I don't know if you, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's set partly in Kenya, in Nairobi. Is it Nairobi? Yes, and there's a slum, you know, sort of shanty town area. It's set partly in London and Surrey, and it's set partly in Nevada. All of it was done in South Africa, because you've got every location you could want.
Yeah.
You've got places that look like Surrey if you want.
Yeah.
The shanty town.
I say that about Bradford.
The shanty town was the set they built for the Nelson Mandela film Long Walk to Freedom.
Yeah.
So just outside Cape Town.
So no, we're still there. Brilliant. I want to ask about, if I may, and you might not have this in your experience, but have you ever worked on a project where people have lost serious amounts of money? And what's that like? Is there a debrief where people all go back and go, do you know what? It's not sold at all. It's been a turkey, and investors have lost a lot of money. Is that ever happened to you?
Most films. I mean, if you've put equity into films. I mean, I used to work for a company called Prescience that did film finance, and it was all tax-based investment. And it's become a bit of a scandal, really, because people they weren't investing in film because they wanted to invest in films. They were investing because they wanted a tax break, because they don't like paying tax. And there were people selling these schemes and saying, oh, instead of paying your tax bill, if you do this, you'll get your money back. And they were, I won't bore everybody, but it was a loan structure whereby you put in a certain amount of cash and you borrowed. And so you got a tax break that was on, let's say you put up 25% cash and 75% loan. And the write-off that you could get was worked out at 40% of 100%. So you could get 40% of 100, but you're only putting up 25. I mean, but then people, that 40 was being split out among intermediaries and all the rest of it. But yes, people will put cash in and they get back 120% of their money within 6 months. And then they were told, and then after that, you know, it'll sell, then it'll be break even after that. And they thought, oh, this is a good deal.
Yeah, too good to be true.
Yeah, and of course it was too good to be true. And because if the film didn't, because ultimately they were at risk for their cash element that they'd put up. Yeah. And if the film didn't sell, and they didn't understand and they didn't realise. And yes, I've sat in meetings with people where, you know, too late, they've realised that the risk they've taken, and most films don't sell at the level that they will get their money back.
That was my next question. What's the sort of balance? How sure can you be going into something like Official Secrets or Eye in the Sky that it's actually going to you know, it's going to hit a theatrical window at a time when people are actually going to go pay and see it.
You can't.
You can't.
No, there is. I mean, that's that famous quote about is it William Goldman? Nobody knows anything. Nobody. I mean, I don't think it's entirely true. You do know the potential of things, and you do know quality. You know, when I mean, like with King's Speech, I knew that was, you know, when I used to work at Prescience, you get projects to look at. And there's usually a but. It's like, yes, the story's good, yes, the script is good, the cast, the director, but somewhere that it might be, but the director, you know, has had a couple of turkeys, or there'll be something. It's very, very rare that it's like all ticks.
Yeah.
And King's Speech was one where it was all ticks.
But I heard, because I was an extra in the King's Speech, you probably heard me say that before. It was the coldest day of my life. It was in December. And I had to sit in the stand at Elland Road for 12 hours, and I would never recommend being an extra in the winter. It was awful.
Was that the first scene where they're doing the
Listening to that speech at Wembley, supposed to be at Wembley, and there's a bit where there was supposed to be a drip of water from this onto this old-fashioned microphone, and they spent about 3 hours with that, and it never made it into the film. But I heard so that's an aside, but that's my personal input into it. I heard that it nearly didn't get the finance because, was it American money or something that they just didn't see? It was
Harvey Weinstein company money.
Yeah, they didn't think that a film about a king with a stammer was going to be such a big deal. Is that not true?
No, that's not true at all. So shall I talk about King's Speech?
Well, it went on to be one of the most successful independent films of its time.
Yeah.
And according to IMDb, so while we're on King's Speech, a few figures, and I don't know whether these are made up on IMDb, because it's like...
No, they come, because they did it from
Wikipedia,
Box Office Mojo. They're pretty accurate.
Well, what they're saying is the approximate cost was $15 million.
It was 8 million quid.
And they're saying that worldwide sales was $414 million.
Box office. Box office was for... The thing is, there's only two figures that you can rely on that are publicly available, and they're on IMDb and Box Office Mojo, and now Box Office Mojo is linked to IMDb. The budget figure on IMDb is roughly accurate. The box office figure is pretty accurate. But I'm going to have this is a little sort of bugbear of mine.
We don't mind bugbears.
People say the film cost 80 million, and it's already taken 200 million at the box office.
Yeah.
And it drives me mad. And it's like saying Marks and Spencer's is selling this woolly jumper for 10 quid, and the sheep only cost 50p. It's like there are a lot of intervening stages.
Yes.
So there's the raw cost of the film, the negative cost, as the Americans would say, and then there's all the different revenue streams. So like the box office is split between the exhibitors and the distributors. So the distributors at best will get 40% of that figure. What it doesn't take into account is all the other costs, the costs of releasing the film, the marketing costs, what they used to call the print costs, but of course it's all, hard drives and things now. You can't, there's no way of finding out. Well, there are sort of subscription things like where you can get more, but it's like home entertainment, DVD sales, they sort of collapse, but they still, exist. That information's not available. And what the TV companies pay for it.
Yes.
So, but the rough rule of thumb used to be that if the box office was 3 times the cost of the film, that should be a film that has broken even. So if it was, the film cost 10 million and the box office was 30, that represents a film that has... But of course, there's so much jiggery pokery and shenanigans in the way who has their hands.
Yeah.
The distributors, the way the economics works and the way is so crooked that even if a film's done really, really well, the distributors will keep the lion's share of it. And it doesn't, you can try and audit them. You can, you are on a hiding to nothing because they have been figuring out since 1910 how to hide it. And with the studios, that's why people make, you know, the things that matter are getting your fee in the budget, and if you're a powerful piece of talent, you can get what they call adjusted gross, AGR, where you're getting a share of revenues.
If it's successful,
gross
more
revenues.
Then,
But if you're on net points, net profits, it virtually never happens. You know, it never. It's like trickle down theory. It doesn't trickle down.
It's fascinating. And you know, the world is changing, isn't it, all the time? And in this space, I'm going to open up to questions in a minute to the floor, but I wonder, with video on demand, you know, Netflix and Amazon and the whole, you know, there was the whole thing around Cannes, wasn't there, whether Netflix films could make it in. Is the job of doing what you do and what you love doing, obviously, around the sort of film finance, is it getting harder, or are there more opportunities because there's more platforms and there's more content being created, I suppose? So, you know, there's new opportunities, things like crowdfunding. Do you think that what you have done as your career up to now, is it now just being depleted because of all the new sort of formats, or is it an exciting time? I mean, what's your view on that?
I think, for once, this is good news. Because, you know, there's obviously a very purist approach that films should only be shown in a cinema and all the rest of it. But the reality is, even if they are shown in the cinema, they're not there for very long. Most people consume films, horrible word, I shouldn't use verb to use, but on at home on television. You know, or maybe they'll have it, you know, nobody buys DVDs anymore, but, you know, they'll watch it on Netflix, or they'll watch it on you know, a broadcast television.
Now as well.
Yeah, and you've got the producers making the films, and you've got the distributors distributing. Now, the traditional distributors, theatrical release in the cinema, followed by home entertainment, followed by television. You know, and people like Spielberg saying that, you know, they shouldn't allow Netflix films to be nominated for academies and everything. And I think it's okay for you, Mr. Spielberg, who has no problem. You know, your films are always going to get a theatrical release. But if you're an independent producer, are you supposed to not make a film because it's Netflix? You know, the distributors, you know, especially the independent distributors, are really having a hard time now.
Yeah.
People are not going to the cinema as much. They're not, you know, the revenues that the things that made, because usually you would lose money on the theatrical release.
Yeah.
Because it's like the loss leader, it's like the marketing for the film, but they make money on the home entertainment and TV, and they kept the majority of that money. Very unfairly in my view, but that's the way it goes. And they are furious, you know, because they can't compete with Netflix and Amazon, you know, who can just fully finance the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And the sales agents, who are the intermediaries between the producers and the distributors, they're also having a hard time. And I have limited sympathy because when the times were good, they didn't look after the producers. You know, the producers are the golden geese that are, what am I mixing up my, they're the ones laying the golden eggs.
Yeah.
But they were half-starved.
Yeah.
And even when a film worked, they didn't, you know, they got an unfair proportion of it. So now, actually, I think that the balance of power has shifted towards the producers because, and I write, you know, one of the things I do is I write business plans for people, and I write, you know, pitches to help producers raise money. And I say this, you know, exactly that. The balance of power has shifted. And if you can get money for development, very hard to do, but you can create IP, then you can shop around. Then you can pick, make a choice, hopefully, between a Netflix deal and I think it's, you know, it's better for producers.
Okay. No, that's an interesting take. I think
because there's more, because demand is up.
Yeah.
Demand is up,
Yeah.
which means the people who supply the demand have got more chance.
more work. And this is something that comes up quite a bit with the film purists about video on demand being the death of cinema. And, what all I see from a production point of view, film office work, is that there's so much work out there at the moment for lots of people to get involved in the industry, which there wasn't actually 5-10 years ago.
And TV as well. I mean, I have very little involvement with TV, but it's absolutely booming in the UK.
Yeah.
And when the tax credit was allowed for high-end drama, it's like quadrupled. Went from like 100 million a year to, it's all like, I got all this, if you Google it, I just, got all these stats off. They'll be on the BFI or it'll be in some press release or whatever.
Yeah, and that's a good point. For anyone interested in the production landscape in the UK, the BFI have their statistical yearbook, which they produce every year. It's online, and you can see exactly, whether they're accurate or not. They're as accurate as anything.
BFI is pretty accurate, I think.
And they'll tell you how many people are involved in the industry, how much money was made, how much money was spent in terms of feature films. It's just a really good idea to look at it and just to get an idea of the industry and the size of it and the complexity of it. I am going to come to questions, but let me just ask you about Cannes, because I know that you've been many times, and when, again, our old friend Steve Abbott, it's my 34th year. and aspiring filmmakers, we've got quite a few here.
He only goes to watch movies now. He doesn't do it. He just
he's the granddaddy of it, and he says, I'm just going to meet some old friends. But I wonder if, for people that might be interested in thinking, I'm going to go to Cannes because it's the world's biggest film festival and everything else, it's a marketplace, isn't it? It's a buying and selling at one level. And I suppose, is there any words of advice for someone that thinks, I'm going to go because I've made this film, or I want to make a film, and I'm going to go see what it's all about? Would you say don't bother, or is there a...
No, I'd say go. But go and do it as cheaply as possible. And I'm going to give you an illustration of how cheaply it can be done. Cannes is like a Venn diagram. There are lots of different overlapping cans, and it's fascinating when you go to sort of, get a little bit of a insight into all these different cans that are going on simultaneously and overlapping with each other. Years ago, I worked for a company called Renaissance Films, and there was a friend of mine. The head of development was a lady called Sophie Jansen. She had a friend who is a film buff, and he had his own blog. This is quite a long time ago. Blogs were quite, new then, on film. And he did Cannes, the cheapest I have ever seen anybody do it. He was camping somewhere outside Cannes. He had a bicycle. I think it might have been one of those, the ones that sort of, fold up.
Yeah.
He had, you can register if you've got any, any kind of involvement with film. You can register, and then you can book tickets to go and see the films that are in the festival. So he was going to films all day long, and for the red carpets, you have to. It's black tie. So he hadn't realised this. This was his first year in Cannes. So he borrowed a jacket off somebody. He bought, I think he actually went to the extent of buying a tie, bow tie, cheaply in the, sort of hypermarket or whatever. And he came to our office, which also had a little apartment attached to it. And he used to shower and get changed and head off for, and it's like, it can be done.
Yeah.
People share rooms, they sleep on sofas, they stay outside and come in on the train. There's people who work in post-production, all those guys go to Cannes.
Yeah. They don't have a lot of money.
They don't, the big thing is to try and blag your way into parties. They sleep in, maybe go to the beach. I don't think people go to the beach much. And they stand outside. There's a bar called the the Petty Majestic. And that's where all the Brits are. Right. And it's like, you know, you will meet people, you will have fun, but it's like you don't, you have to find a way to do it.
Yeah, and I think a bit of realism as well. You're probably not going to be able to pitch your film to some producer.
No, you're going to end up standing outside the Petty Majestic getting drunk with people that you could get drunk with in Soho, but that's, you know...
It's good advice. It's good advice, and I think you do.
But
need
you
to
never
do it.
know.
You never know who you're going to end up helping out, who you're going to end up bumping into. So you need, and I think to come back and say, well, I've been to Cannes, I've seen what it's all about, and maybe it isn't for me, but you've experienced it, haven't you? I want to go to Coachella, the music festival. I'll get there one day. I will get there. Well, Anne, thanks. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I think we could probably have gone on much longer, but I'm conscious of the weather and lots of cancelled trains, and the fact that you made it all the way up here. So would you give Anne a very warm welcome?